Okay, guys. Yes, recording is on track. So yeah, Lorlike.
Okay, so how you see elections in this Ground Council? Who will elect these members of Ground Council?
I think that's up to be decided still. Um, I think the main idea is to have the council within representation of members of the community, like filling specific quotas. That's what kind of was drafted. Um, but it's certainly up to discussion how these council members should be elected for sure. So I guess there's not a straightforward answer I'm thinking of right now. If anyone has any idea on how we can select in a transparent way community council members, it's more than welcome.
Okay. So we are talking like frequently about optimism, right? So how are members of Citizen House in optimism are selected?
In Citizen House, as far as
Yeah, Citizen House
yeah, as
members.
far as I'm concerned, it's one token, one vote. But I guess Gina, you can maybe take it from here.
Yeah, I don't know if you can hear me.
Yep.
Yeah, I can.
Okay, cool. So I think that like the first cohort of citizens from the Citizen House was selected by the Optimism Collective. But starting after that first cohort, it was the community with the voting badge who selected the members of the Citizens House. So as Ivy was saying, the Citizens House is a one person, one vote. It's like an upper chamber of legislative decisions. But again, Optimism has like two chambers. So the citizenship, like this idea of reputation based on identity based governance, and this first cohort was selected by I'm taking a look to see if there was another cohort. Second one, yeah, that is true. So the first one was selected by the Optimism Foundation, and the second one was selected by the community. I would like to clarify something, and that is the document that is posted. It's a request for comments, so it's not a final idea. The idea was to discuss, like point by point, each one of these options. So there are a lot of things that are not defined here. And that's on purpose, because if everything is defined on a request for comment, there's no real need for feedback, and the idea would be to draft this as a community and not as a one person posting something. I mean, the conversation that FES had with multiple members of the community, me included, and I know that some of you as well, it was part of a collective crafting of a vision. I think that's important to mention, because it's not like we're going to vote this. No, we're not going to vote this. We're going to discuss this and see if it makes sense to use some of this, and some we can just discard it and then vote. That's
So my opinion, like we need to like this maybe at first define what is reputation in Decentraland DAO. So like wearables submissions, yeah, like proposal submissions, and maybe we can make some kind of simulation forecast how much members now could be eligible, yeah, to receive this reputation, so that we can make some kind of forecast to see the numbers, to see the statistics, because like it's very hard to understand if it will fit us or not. So I want to clarify that like I'm for hybrid system, I'm for reputation, but I think like this Grants Council is something that is overreactive. So we need to make it step by step, like with some kind of stats. just my opinion.
I had a question, if it was okay.
Yeah, go for it, Lester.
This is RFC. Thank you, Gino, for pointing that out, that it's not binding or a proposal. I think we need to have more of these conversations, right? It's great Fez put this together, and then let's all talk about it verbally, because I've been on the calls with Ivy and other people, and we've written Tobic. I see we've gotten a lot of stuff accomplished, I feel like, in terms of understanding people's different opinions and letting them explain it versus text. So this text comes off as really aggressive to me. And I don't usually like to say aggressive, but I mean, it comes off as like, this is what's going to happen. So however we can explain better that this is just sort of like a conversational starter, I think that would be helpful. In addition, I'd like to throw in the mix to the conversation. Instead of this grant council, we need to identify like what that language is in terms of approving, the word approve, air quote, approve grants. I think we need to implement a risk system for grants. And that risk system is applied or defined by us and applied to grants by the SDK team and the grant support squad. Personally, I don't know what the grant support squad is doing. There's only 16 grants. There's 3 people divided by 3. That's 5 grants that you have to manage, which is, 1 meeting a month per grantee. So that's 5 meetings a month for one person. So that's just over 1 meeting a week on 5 days. So I feel like the grant support squad can step up and actually review grants during that voting process. I think along with the SDK team, they can do a feasibility assessment. So we have this risk assessment, right? Like low, medium, high. And whatever group of people, whatever cohort that is, they slap that assessment on proposals. It's a non-binding thing, but when people read the proposal, they'll see the risk assessment level attached to that proposal when they're voting. Just an idea.
Yeah, like being not binding, which is something we've discussed before last round. And I think it makes sense, actually. The Arbitrum DAO has a line of grants which works in that way. That's an example I shared before. They have this council, with recognized community members, and they just, expede on the grant in a non-binding way, which is, I think, pretty reasonable. Basically, for the same reasons that some community members have mentioned, for not being, centralized or whatever, which I don't think it is, but that's another discussion. But I see it as a good input, actually.
Yeah, I think we need to get rid of all the language that like this grant council or however it gets chosen is influencing anything beyond an assessment. There should be no approving, no selecting. Those words should not exist. It should be assess. And whatever that assessment we define should be applied to all grants. Social media grant might not have a technical assessment, right? And we could define which grant categories require more of an assessment, right? But there'll always be an assessment. And that assessment is just for more information for the people voting. There is no word approval. There is no word selecting or choosing. It's assess.
I was thinking that maybe, I tend to agree with that idea, but I do think that with the current governance, like the current voting mechanisms that we have, if it's only an assessment, if like a random wallet comes with like 5 million BP and votes on a grant, even when the assessment committee or whoever said on the comments, this looks fishy, this looks weird, this is not dual. For example, I would love to see members of the foundation saying, hey, this is great, but we're not ready to support this grant yet. And like having them saying that before a grant got approved by the community. It would be nice to have something like that. But to be honest, with the current voting mechanism, it's like even if someone says, "Hey, this is not dual," a random wallet can come and vote and get the money. Maybe we could have something in the middle, like, okay, it's not an approval, but it's not an assessment. It's a pre-approval of a maximum budget cap, for example. Like, okay, this project looks good. The idea is doable, but this is the first time that this team is gonna do something for this DAO. So we won't give them like 240,000 bucks just because. We're gonna give them tops, I don't know, 30K or 40K. And then they can define the amount of money they need for the project based on that cap. That's something that Arbitrum and Optimism has. I could look for they have like Optimism tiers.
Because I don't like that, just because that sounds like a representative democracy. I don't think anything the Grant Council does should have an impact on anything. I like what you led your first part, an assessment, and part of that assessment, maybe it's risky, right? If a first-time grantee is asking for $240,000, and then they say why it's risky, the Grant Council or whatever, right? But they don't unapprove or disapprove or not pre-approve something, because then what is the point of even voting if there's more weight on decision-making on this Grant Council? So we're moving from a totally decentralized, democratized democracy to an elective representation. And I don't like that. If we want to go that way, that's what we need to do. But we need to be very, like, let's not hide and beat around the bush and call it a Grant Council and all this stuff. No. If the votes from the people are not directly influencing the outcome of the proposal and somebody else is influencing the outcome of those proposals, that is not a true decentralized, what we currently have, democracy. So let's just be clear about that.
Just some thoughts on that. I hear you, Lastrom, but I believe, like, right, let's not call it a council. We can call it a committee, whatever. But currently, the revocation committee, has the authority and the competence to revoke a grant despite being passed by the community, right? So it's not the same principle, but kind of. It's just gatekeeping, prior to the vote.
No, but there's a lot of things that held on. That's an unfair comparison, because it can only get to the revocation committee if the grant support squad has elevated it. The only way to get elevated to the grant support squad is if the individuals don't show their work. And so maybe we need to improve the individuals showing their work to the grant support squad in more of a public forum, so that then the community can see that the grantee is behind, and then the GSS agrees with the community, and then it's a consensus sent to the revocation community. So that's a bad comparison. We don't, we had this conversation a week and a half ago. The DAO committee can't do certain things because their mandate, right?
Yeah.
Well, okay. Yeah, that's fine. But I don't think we should be mandating a group of people, whatever you call them, a council or a committee, to pre-approve or have any weight on the outcome of a proposal other than an assessment. That's all.
Yeah. Giving the word to Dogman, but I do believe it's kind of similar in the way that it's true you have to do a formal, elevation and escalation as well, but they do have the authority to do that anyway. So if any community member just elevates the proposal, they have to consider it. But yeah, Dogman, say something.
Yeah, I just kind of want to get on here and say my opinion. I think, I agree with Lastrom. Like, a council makes sense, or whatever you want to call it. Maybe not a council, but whatever, a committee. If they just initially look over the grant and say, here are facts about the grant, like, it makes sense for someone who has a technical background to look at a grant and say, yes, this seems technically possible, or this doesn't. Someone with a modeling background to look at a modeling grant and say, yes, this person has a background, it makes sense. I don't think whatever committee or council, I don't think they should be ruling on the grant at all. I don't think they should be saying, like, this grant passes or this grant semi-passes and we'll give them partial money. I think they should just say straight facts that are supported by evidence based on their background and let the community decide. And then I think it's up to the community to read grants effectively. And yeah, as Jester said, objective things only. Nothing, this doesn't. I don't like the style of this. Only things like this technically works with the Decentraland. This technically doesn't work with the Decentraland. We've seen so many grants that have fantastic looking models, but they're not optimized for the Decentraland at all, so they don't work. Like it doesn't even have to be like, yeah, this looks good. It just has to be like this objectively will work or not. But again, even still, I don't think they should be ruling on grants. I think they should just be stating facts, and that's it.
I'm completely aligned with Lestrom and Dogman. Want to say that, my opinion, we need to not distract from the main concept of hybrid system is reputation. So we are talking about Grants Council. We still didn't define what reputation is in Decentraland DAO. So maybe we can start with it. It's like the main concept of this Grants Council. Also, I want to tell you that grants below 50K will be voted by this RFC by token holders. So it's not completely solves our problem with stake-weighted system. So again, we are coming back to the reputation. So maybe let's talk about reputation. What are the criteria? What badges will make this reputation? So it's the first one. Second one, I want to say that we need to fix our core units. So, for example, like the last grant advertising platform, so community voted for it, and then after the voting, GSS said that it's not eligible. So maybe it could be told earlier. So there are many things that we need to fix instead of making some kind of new bodies, something like this. And by the way, Optimism Grants Council is voted by token holders. Thank you.
Before we get into that, I do think we need to talk about reputation, but I also just want to ask, maybe someone can answer this. I assume that the actual voting thresholds would change with this also, or is that not even part of this?
Yeah, I think there are a couple of proposals, going around. There's one of reducing the grant caps from 240 to 100K. So I guess, it definitely needs some, adaptation. So the idea of this proposal was to discuss it, holistically and integrally. There are a lot of proposals, parts moving, but thresholds might or can be discussed as well, for sure. I guess it's just, like Laura mentioned a couple of times, it's a puzzle, with different moving parts. So we need to make them fit into a whole system that makes sense in the overall.
I have a question. How would it work with reputation system? Just anybody. I'm not saying a specific one, but I'm a new person. I'm starting to develop in Roblox, and I want to go get a Roblox grant. How would that work? How would I have to achieve a badge? Am I limited only to a certain grant category, to a grant cap? Do I have to do certain things first? Does it make sense to gatekeep creation like that? Because you're a new person to the platform, if we have all of these other checks and balances on the back end. So it's just kind of, I'm posing that in terms of, are we, take a step back, are we hindering any type of potential creativity? And we have to stop thinking about individual creativity. If we want this platform to go anywhere, which I've been a maxi since 2019, think of indie developers, other studios, other people. Our game jam, I don't even know how, we had 35 people or things or entities sign up. How many were new, indie studios? So when we approach this stuff, it's not about single bad actors. We need to start thinking about our frameworks as supporting new studios coming in that want to create things. So how would that work? What do people think about slapping all of these prerequisites as almost gatekeeping?
I think, as far as reputation goes, we're talking more about voting and giving grants. For me, I think that applying for grants should be pretty open, and anyone should be able to apply. If you have, the skills, you should be able to apply. I think for deciding what's best for this community, that's where you get into space where you say, maybe we want people who are active in the community to decide which way the community goes. I think you can do that a lot of ways. I think the wearable talk is a great way. You can monitor how much wearable sales and how much is returned to the DAO, not just how many wearables are produced. So it doesn't just have to be like people who are making a bunch of nonsense. It can be people who are actually contributing to the DAO. I think the same with pull requests on GitHub, everything like that. There's ways to have voting reputation that doesn't really affect applying to grants, at least in my opinion.
Yeah, I think that for me the balance is between like not gatekeeping, but like safeguarding the DAO funds. So my experience, I'll give you my experience. A couple of months ago, we applied for a grant on Optimism, basically to see how the mechanism was. And even though we said, yeah, we've been working with the central DAO, blah, 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 they were like, yeah, but this is a big request for a team or for a person that has never done anything for the Optimism ecosystem. We don't know you. So it's great, but if you want to like take on this, the maximum amount of money that the DAO would give you is X, for example. So how reputation works, I mean, I think that we should try to make it as automated as possible. I think that's important because if not, we risk with a centralization problem. I always said that for me, anything related to reputation needs to be as automated as possible. And we should target to have less reputation sources and more automated, right? Instead of having a lot of sources, some of them automated, some of them not, like trying to find sources of reputation, as we were saying, like pull requests, previous grant performance, like something related to a stake that you have on the project, something related to the history of the wallet applying, regarding like this central experience, like do you use a product, do you ever, I don't know, deploy the land, do you ever like bought a wearable or created a wearable or installed a wearable, like things like that are on the blockchain and that we know that we could for sure track. So with that, that's why I was saying maybe having like some kind of trust tires could be good, because you can give people the freedom to apply at things without gatekeeping, but safeguarding the DAO treasury by progressively broadening the amount of money or the amount of scope that a team or an individual can make. If you're an indie game dev studio, okay, that's fine. And you never did anything in the central, that's cool. You can apply for a grant. It won't be like the biggest grant, but you can. And the assessment from the I don't know, the grants assessment committee, council, wherever, it's okay, this team looks super skilled, but they never did anything in the central, so that's a warning, and the community can decide. That could be an option.
Gina, I understand that. For me, the downside of that is, some developers want to contribute to a platform but aren't necessarily active in the platform. And this might be a fringe case, but I have seen this before where like a big kind of company comes in and they have a proven track record, but they've never done anything in Decentraland before. And everyone's kind of like, oh, you don't have a name, you've never been in the world. And it's like, there are companies who are capable of producing things that could very much help Decentraland that don't necessarily spend time in Decentraland. So I'm just hesitant to, like I said, create a mechanic for stopping people from applying to grants. I think if we have this sort of council that we're talking about, or committee that looks over the grant and says, like, look, here's the facts. This studio has a track record who's done stuff before. It's up to the community. I think people, come in and sometimes they want to add something maybe even superficial to Decentraland, maybe an additional app or something. And for that, you don't really need to be in a world. You can understand programming well and understand how to make a mobile app and, tie into Decentraland without necessarily being in Decentraland. So that's my only concern with that. And maybe there is like a middle ground there where they can't apply for the highest tier grant or like the two highest tier grants, something like that. But generally, I would err to the side of staying away from making the grant process harder to apply to. I think we should make it better insight on what the grant holds, but I don't think we should make it any harder to apply to.
Yeah, looking at the comments right now, that's the thing you were saying last time. I mean, it's good to have the council or whoever flagging maybe a proposal and saying, hey, this one might be risky because A, B, and C. I guess the challenge is to define what risk is, right? Which kind of lead us to the same way of having people an opinion or judgment or whatever. And I think the reputation system is the way to entrust those people opinions. But again, how to define risky, it would be up for those members.
Yeah, sorry, I was just typing in the comments. I think that risk assessment framework comes from the community. And, we have a wearable curation team. Me, last term, I probably would not be on the wearable curation team because I don't think I've ever created a wearable. But I could provide some pretty good insight on the SDK side, right? So whatever group of people that we want to call them and how they get, voted on or elected to this group of people, they should come from all facets of Decentraland, right? Like one wearable person, one SDK person, maybe two, something like that, right? And so each person could give their color on their expertise and whatever framework that has been derived from the community. Those decisions and assessments from each individual person go into a report, and it gets slapped onto the proposal. Nice, big, easy. I'm visualizing 4 bars across the top: green, yellow, orange, red. Right? That says like low, medium, risky, super risky, and then they can click there, and the accordion drops down, and there's the risk assessment and the reasons why. Right? Categorized by if it's a full scene, then this, here's the SDK portion and why this is bad. Here's maybe the SDK portion's awful and the budget is great, or vice versa. So those would be types of things that would show a more wholesome approach from a group of people from the community opining on a proposal, not necessarily the actual proposal and grantee defending their proposal. This is just, a third-party assessment.
Mm-hmm.
And you know what? If it takes them reading every proposal, I'm happy to pay them to do that. I'm happy to vote for that DAO money to go towards them, because I think we spend like $1 million a year on the DAO, running it with support squads and core units and committees and things. Somebody can check me if I'm wrong, but it's about $1 million a year. So we need to really understand, if we've spent $1 million a year in almost 2.5 years, we're coming up on maybe 2 to 3 million out of 13. It's getting to be, you can do the math of percentage wise, what's our overhead to run our DAO? And I would like to see, sort of pivoting, and we've talked about this in another call, I'd be like, why can't we create a test framework? I would like to see our governance team, when we have these situations like this, to create test environments so that we can test what these badges look like, what this stuff looks like. I think we need a better test environment for our governance than just always voting on it like this, putting it into production, and then all hell breaks loose and we have to stop grants, roll it back, redo it. So I would definitely like to see some progress on that. Personally, the notification system, it's cool, but I'd rather have a test environment.
Okay. Anyone in the audience want to share some thoughts, words? Stage is all yours.
We gotta step down, but thanks for letting me talk.
Sure.
Yeah, I'll step down too. Thanks for having me up, but I'll be in the chat.
Sweet. Just reading some comments. Yeah, I think it's most inputs have gone towards the line of not having, the council or whatever having binding decisions, which is something reasonable. So that's a great input from the sessions. Just trying to think our ways and how they can contribute, to the funds allocation. And I do believe the repetition system needs to be outlined with some more detail. There have been some proposal towards that end for VP for creators and such, but there's a lot of actions that deserve recognition from community members. So yeah, the idea basically is to empower that, to keep deepening that, and try to balance a bit like the current heavy stake weighted system we have.
Yeah, I have a quick question. So, VP for content creator, does it conflicts with this RFC proposal? And if yes, then why?
I don't think it conflicts
No.
with this. Last time we did the math, like VP for content creators, at least with the original proposal, wasn't really moving the needle of like decentralizing like the voting power. But I mean, I wouldn't say it conflicts with any of this. Actually, it could be like one reputation scores, let's say.
Would you help to move it to the governance stage?
Yeah, I think it's on. I mean, I created the poll. I think you promoted to draft, and it's still there, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, you can take a look. Regarding the questions on the chat about like data, we could try to create a report on, for example, how many strangers have had grant through votes versus non-community members. That we have some human decision factor of who's a stranger and who's a non-community member, but we could do that. And we could also do a report, like specific report on how much money the DAO spent on like operations and things like that. I mean, if it's useful for this discussion, I can take that and work with the team on creating a report on that. regarding media and tendering, being a tender, I wouldn't say that external teams should be forced. What I was saying is the problems that we were seeing before being and tendering was that people voted sometimes for a great idea, for a grant, but the reality was that the team behind that idea couldn't execute on that idea. And maybe the grant failed because the idea was good, but the team wasn't skilled to do that. So that's why we say, okay, maybe we can like separate the execution from the problem setting and problem definition in like solutioning phase. And that's why we thought about a public licitation mechanism. It's up to the community to decide which problems to tackle and what would be the best way of tackling them at a high level, and then an execution team could provide the skills to actually solve the issue and do the thing. But yeah, I agree. It shouldn't be like forced. It should be like the preferred path, let's say.
Yeah. If any other wants to join the stage, feel free to do so. Otherwise, chat is still open. Then again, this is an RFC, so we're just exchanging ideas.
I just want to say quickly, I appreciate everybody coming. I think this needs to happen more often. And I do this for a living. I work in the Decentraland and program for a living. So I'm always in my computer. Others might not be, but for others that have publicly said that this is their full-time job, I would expect you to be here and be available if you're not in a meeting to help chart the course of this DAO. So I appreciate everybody spending the time, whether you're taking time away from your current job or this is your current job, to be here. Because these vocal conversations are so much better than just reading the RFC and blah, blah, blah on the forum and comments and pointing fingers, and then it gets personal. So really appreciate everybody taking the time to come to these, because I think these are very, very impactful.